Thank you. I put it to you that there is a thing called the trans mafia, and they were out in Hyde Park at the weekend.
Well, I put it to you that the vast majority of trans people and allies are kind, gentle, non-violent, and they engage in thoughtful, rational discussion. The same goes for most feminists who are critical of trans people. Most of them are kind, they have a different point of view, but they do so and express it respectfully. So we shouldn't allow the behaviour of a tiny minority to colour the way we think about these two different groups.
Would you arm trans kids?
Of course not. No, that's absolutely absurd. But I'm absolutely certain that whoever made that placard does not represent 99.9% of trans people.
There's quite a lot of them around them, though, to be fair, Peter. Just to say, if I was at a demonstration and I saw something like that and I was desperate to have my cause given good publicity and to get my views across, I dare say I would actually go and try and do something about that. People watching on television now will be able to see a ring of banners. They look like those really naff Roman soldiers when they all used to put their shields up. They don't want their faces put out there. They've got umbrellas covering their faces. They've got all these flags flying high. It does look like a mob, Peter.
Well, I'm a strong supporter of trans rights and inclusion and have been for half a century. But I do not think it's appropriate to hide your face. If you believe in a principle or idea, you should express it and show yourself. Whichever side of the debate you're on, be open and upfront. Those kind of tactics are counterproductive. And the fact that we're having this discussion now and all this publicity is being given to this tiny, unrepresentative banner about arming trans kids, which is quite clearly absurd and wrong, it just proves how counterproductive it is.
Yeah, but
I want to have a dialogue. I want to have a dialogue with women's rights activists who have concerns about women's rights and trans rights. Let's talk together respectfully and kindly.
I understand that, Peter. Look, I understand that, but I do want to push back on your assertion that this is just a small fringe minority. Look at what happened in Australia and New Zealand with Kelly J. Keane. There was a lot of vitriol north of the border in Scotland as well. If you have a cursory look on Twitter, online, and you see the kind of absolutely abominable abuse that gets volleyed at people who just say that women are women, and you look at the widespread cancellation or attempted cancellation of people like J.K. Rowling and all of this hate and death threats that they get, I'm sorry, Peter, but it is not a small minority of people. In fact, when you actually look at the small minority of people who are trans or are transitioning or something like that, and you extrapolate the amount of abuse and hate and issues like this that are dished out, it's actually a strangely large proportion.
Well, it's a very small vocal minority, but it does cut both ways. Trans women and allies get the same kind of abuse and threats. Because I support trans rights, I've had threats to kill me, rape me, and castrate me from people who claim they are defending women's rights. So it does happen in a small minority of cases, a very vocal minority, on both sides of the argument. And it's wrong on both sides. We have to cool it. We have to discuss this issue. It's a human rights issue. We have to discuss it in a calm, polite, courteous way and recognise that there are people who have different points of view. And I find some of the trans critics very offensive. But I'm not going to abuse them. I'm not going to threaten them. I want to have a dialogue.
OK, why should women be made to feel less safe because somebody who feels like a woman wants to enter their changing rooms? Because that is a lot of what this is about, really, isn't it? Because I interview a lot of trans people on this show, and the majority of the ones that I talk to, frankly, just want to get on with their lives, don't really have any desire at all to get into any hoo-ha when it comes to going into a women's changing room or anything along those lines whatsoever, don't really think that male rapists who now say they're a woman should be in a woman's prison. So I completely get all that. So why should women have to pander to a fraction of a percent of people who say that they feel like a woman?
Well, you know, trans women have been using women's toilets for decades. And I can't remember a single occasion where they have caused a problem, where they have assaulted a woman or whether they've made a woman feel unsafe. It just hasn't happened. But of course, having said that, I understand women's anxieties and I want to find a solution, but the solution has not got to be a generalized attack on trans people or generalized bans or exclusion. You know, people who do bad things, there are all kinds of people who do bad things. There are some trans people who do bad things, but that's not an excuse to demonize and exclude the whole trans community.
Can I just, I've literally, as you've said that, Peter, right, I just Googled while you said that you can't remember an incident, and there's a headline here, straight away, transgender woman 18, sexually assaulted girl 10 in Morrison's toilet. So, it happens. Right? You can't say it doesn't happen, it happens.
Okay, well, I was not aware of that particular case, but even so, out of the many instances, the tens of thousands, the millions of times trans women have gone into women's toilets, that is a very atypical and unrepresentative incident. Most trans women respect a biological woman. They have behaved with absolute decorum and courtesy towards other women. They are not a problem, and we mustn't go down the road of demonizing them. It's so cruel, so unkind, and I think we just have to have a bit more generosity.
Okay. Is any woman who thinks that someone born with a penis can't be a woman a TERF?
Well, I don't use that term because it is deemed to be an insult, and I don't want to get into insulting people. I want to have a debate, a discussion. I want to produce evidence. So in my view, I think if someone does not acknowledge the reality of trans identity, then that is very offensive. And I've got to say, we're talking about two different things here. Biological sex is a reality, and we have to acknowledge that. There are women who are women because of their biology, but there are also women who are women because of their gender identity.
Who think that they're women.
Two different things. Both are valid, and shouldn't be in competition with each other. There are two different kinds of women, but both are equally valid. And both equally deserve respect.
Just one last one to you, Peter, if that's all right. I wonder what your view on this is. When I read out things like LGBTQ activists, I think there are quite a lot of the LGBs who would quite like to ditch the Ts from their particular group at the moment. I know quite a lot of gay men, actually. In fact, I was just chatting one to the other day who said this exact thing to me. Who said, why am I bracketed in the same group as transgender people? Is this movement or group going to eat itself alive with internal division?
Well, all the surveys show that overwhelmingly the LGBT plus community feels united and wants to work and support each other. Historically, trans people have been part of the LGBT plus movement, going back 50 years and more. Some of the people who were at the inception of the gay liberation movement in the United States in the 1960s, they were trans people. I think we have to find our common ground, not just a common ground between LGB and T people, but our common ground with women. Women who are concerned, I hear your concerns. Let's work together to find the common ground and the solution. Don't fight each other. That just gives victory to the misogynists and those who want to do us all down.
Look, Peter,